I was halfway through my coffee when I noticed something strange outside. Voices, laughter, tense. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when I stepped onto the porch, barefoot and stunned, I saw it with my own eyes. A full-blown campsite had popped up overnight on my property. Bright tents, lawn chairs, sleeping bags, coolers. It wasn't just a couple of scouts or some teenagers sneaking onto private land. No. This was organized. I walked closer, crunching across the morning dew, and that's when I saw the worst part. Banner tied between two of my oak trees, HOA annual campout and team building retreat. My stomach dropped. Just then, the queen of all smug grins turned to face me, Nancy Elridge, president of our HOA, dressed in yoga pants, sipping cucumber water, and acting like she owned the world. "Good morning, neighbor," she said, like I was some cheerful bystander. "Isn't it a beautiful day for community bonding?" I blinked. "What the hell is this?" "Oh, relax," she chirped. "We're just using the common green space for our annual retreat." "This isn't common space," I said through clenched teeth. "This is my land. It's on my deed. You've been to the meetings. You know the survey line." Nancy waved a hand, still smiling. "Well, it all looks the same from a distance, doesn't it? And it's just one night. We'll be gone by noon. Tomorrow." That's when I realized something. This wasn't a mistake. She wasn't confused. She was making a statement. This was about control. Ever since I moved into this neighborhood, Nancy had been looking for ways to push me. She hated that I never attended HOA social events, that I didn't paint my mailbox the approved shade of beige, that I refused to plant those stupid HOA-mandated dwarf roses. And worst of all, she hated that I won every appeal against her petty violations. I embarrassed her publicly more than once. Now she wanted to humiliate me by invading my land and pretending it was theirs. I looked around. They had a bonfire pit set up on top of the grass I'd spent 3 years reseeding. Kids were running near my tool shed. Someone had even parked their minivan on the edge of my vegetable garden. This wasn't just arrogance. This was vandalism dressed up in granola and matching t-shirts. But I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. Because in that moment, something flipped inside me. I turned around, walked back inside, shut the door, and locked it. They thought I was retreating. But in reality, I was plotting. Because if Nancy and her pack of rural-happy campers thought they could just pitch tents on my soil and get away with it, they were about to learn the hard way. I don't play fair when I'm crossed. I opened my garage, stepped over the stacks of old buckets and hoses, and pulled out a dusty tarp covering an item I hadn't used in years. The fan. It was time to turn their sleepover into something they'd never forget. Not because it was fun, but because it would stink so bad, they'd never smell normal again. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was mad. Because I was busy, while they laughed under twinkling lights and toasted marshmallows over a fire pit, burning right on my lawn. I was in the garage, crafting a memory they'd never forget and definitely never scrub off their clothes. I started with an old 60-gallon drum. Back in 2017, I tried composting. It went horribly wrong. I ended up with a chemical soup of rotting kitchen waste, banana peels, fish bones, expired eggs, and something that may have once been a rat. I never got around to dumping it. It had just been sitting fermenting. A sealed time capsule of decay. And tonight, it would serve a purpose. I dragged the barrel to the edge of the property line just behind the tree line, where it couldn't be seen from camp. I cracked the lid and had to step back as a cloud of rancid air punched me in the face. It was like opening a coffin at a seafood market in the middle of July. Perfect. Now came the fun part. I set up an industrial-grade fan. I had used for ventilating my basement renovation. Big, loud, and powerful. I aimed it straight at the cluster of tents. And then I waited. By 10:30 p.m., most of the campers had settled in. Their fire was dimming. Only a few low voices murmured in the night. I clicked the power strip from my porch. The fan roared to life, and so did the screams. At first, just coughing, then gagging, then utter, chaotic shouting. What is that smell? Oh my god, it's in my hair. Someone dry heaved. Another person kicked open their tent and stumbled out like they were escaping a gas leak. Nancy ran out barefoot, holding her nose, eyes watering. Is something dead? I watched from behind my curtain, barely holding in my laughter. They staggered like drunks in a biohazard zone, bumping into chairs, waving flashlights. Some screamed at each other. One woman accused a man of using the bathroom in the wrong spot. No one could figure out where the stench was coming from. And then came phase 2, earlier that day. I'd rigged my motion-triggered sprinklers, except instead of water, I filled the tanks with liquid fish emulsion and organic fertilizer that smelled like rotting sardines and vinegar. You usually dilute it. I didn't. I set the trigger range to low and the spray angle to high. The moment someone crossed into the zone, a direct hit, right to the back of the neck. Nancy screamed like she'd been stabbed. What is that? Someone yelled. IT burns. They started running, but every movement triggered another blast. They were slipping on wet grass, falling into each other. One guy tripped face first into his own tent. The tents soaked, the fire drenched and out. The food left behind and swarmed by flies. By midnight, nearly half the campers had fled to their cars. But Nancy stayed. She stood there, hair dripping, clothes stained, chest heaving. She didn't say a word. She just looked up toward my house and smiled. Not the normal HOA smile. A different one. Cold. Promising retaliation. I stared back, heart racing. She didn't run. She didn't break. She was planning something. And somehow, I knew this wasn't over. This was only the beginning. I woke up to silence. Not birds, not lawnmowers. Just a strange, eerie calm, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. I stepped out onto the porch, half expecting to see the scorched remains of tents and shame. But no, the lawn was spotless. The trash was gone. Even the banner had vanished. For a second, I almost respected them. Thought maybe they realized they went too far. But I should have known better. Because when I walked toward the shed to grab a rake, something felt off. The lock was snapped. The door hung open. Inside, every tool was gone. Not stolen, just missing. I stood there staring at the empty hooks and barren shelves, trying to process what I was seeing. That's when I noticed the dirt, fresh, piled in mounds behind the shed. I grabbed a stick and poked around and instantly hit metal. I dug with my hands. Shovel. Wrench. My hedge trimmers. They'd buried them. Every last tool, from my chainsaw to the tiny hand trowel, shoved into the ground like a twisted time capsule. And taped to the inside of the shed was a note. Maybe your tools need a nap after last night. Sweet dreams. HOA, that was the moment it became clear. This wasn't a prank anymore. This was war. I stood there, covered in soil, heart pounding. I wasn't even angry. I was focused, cold, calculating. They had made their move. Now it was my turn again. But I couldn't just go big and messy. Nancy wanted me to blow up. She wanted to catch me losing my cool on camera. It's how the HOA plays. You break, they file complaints, call emergency meetings, and spin it all against you. I needed to go smart. Surgical. So I did what any rational man would do when pushed to the edge. I called Donnie. Now. Donnie is the kind of guy you don't introduce at HOA mixers. Big beard, bigger truck, and even bigger opinions about the right to defend property. He runs a farm supply store out near the county line, and he owes me a favor. Can I borrow the trailer and the crate? I asked. There was a pause. Then he said, You're finally doing it. I'm doing it. The crate arrived the next morning, unmarked and covered with a tarp. I backed it up into the corner of my backyard, just where Nancy's walking trail behind my fence had clear visibility. Inside that crate was the key to psychological warfare, not violence, not property damage. Just pure, unsettling chaos. I spent the afternoon rigging motion sensors, camera decoys, and a few strategic noises that would make anyone walking past think twice about stepping closer. Because if Nancy thought she could turn this into a game of tit for tat, she hadn't seen what I keep in my project files. But then something unexpected happened. That evening, a certified letter showed up in my mailbox. An official violation notice from the HOA. They weren't claiming trespass. No, they were accusing me of creating a hostile environment and violating community decorum. The kicker, they were calling an emergency meeting to discuss whether I should be removed from the neighborhood. Expelled. I laughed out loud because they had no idea what I was about to unleash. They wanted to play dirty, fine, but I was about to go feral. I didn't go to the emergency HOA meeting. I stayed on my porch with a cold drink and let them stew in their own imagination. And that imagination, it was working overtime. Because by now, word had spread about the crate. The neighbors whispered. Kids dared each other to sneak a look. Some even claimed it growled at night. And Nancy couldn't stop pacing past it. Every morning, she'd stroll by with her little clipboard, pretending to take notes. But her eyes always drifted to that tarp. She'd slow down, tilt her head, look for a lock or label. She couldn't help herself, because it wasn't just a box. It was a question mark. And question marks eat control freaks alive. What was inside? What was I planning? I didn't answer. Not once. I just smiled whenever someone asked. Until finally, curiosity got the better of someone. It happened on a Wednesday. Midday. Clear skies. I had set up a camera in my window, just in case. The footage showed a man board member, Gary. He walked up, looking around nervously, glanced both ways like he was crossing traffic. Then he lifted the tarp, and that's when the first speaker went off. Step away from the crate. This property is under wildlife surveillance. Gary dropped the tarp like it burned him. The second speaker triggered. Unauthorized tampering has been recorded. Local authorities will be notified. He ran. I watched the whole thing from my phone, sipping tea. Of course, I didn't call the authorities. There was no surveillance system. Just a few old Bluetooth speakers sensed to a motion sensor. And my voice recording stopped, but perception is everything. That night, Nancy called another emergency HOA meeting. 2 in 1 week. I wasn't invited, but I still found out what was said thanks to Maggie, a neighbor on the HOA who secretly can't stand Nancy. She called me after the meeting, whispered like she was in a spy movie. They think you're building some kind of protest bunker or storing explosives. Someone said you might have smuggled in wild hogs. I nearly choked on my drink. Wild hogs, they're scared. Nancy's especially shaken. She's trying to hold it together, but honestly, you're breaking her. She's cracking in front of everyone. I hung up the phone smiling. It wasn't about hurting anyone. I'd never break the law or do something reckless, but I didn't need to. I was using what they'd used against me for years: intimidation, ambiguity, bureaucracy. They had rules. I had strategy. And then, 2 days later, Nancy finally snapped. I was mowing my lawn when she marched up to me with a manila envelope, cheeks red and jaw clenched. "You've created a toxic environment for this community," she hissed. "You've weaponized paranoia, and I won't stand for it." She handed me the envelope like it was a court summons. Inside, a formal HOA proposal for my forced removal, signed by 6 board members. That was more than enough for a vote. I calmly closed the envelope. "Interesting," I said. Nancy glared at me like she expected me to crumble. "Instead," I said, "you might want to cancel your vote. Because if you try to remove me..." I paused, locking eyes with her. "I'll open the crate." She blinked for the first time. She looked scared. She had no idea what was in there. And I had no plans to tell her, because the only thing more powerful than revenge is making your enemy imagine it. 3 days passed after I told Nancy I'd open the crate if she pushed the vote. She didn't come near my house once, but I knew she was watching. One evening, I caught the glint of binoculars from her upstairs window. Another time, I noticed her little dog trotting accidentally past my fence 4 times in 1 hour. She wasn't walking the dog. She was collecting intel. But here's the thing. The longer the crate sat unopened, the worse it got for her. She was spiraling. I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. She was unraveling herself. And then, she did exactly what I hoped she'd do. She got sloppy. It started when I heard the drone. A soft buzz above my backyard while I was raking leaves. I looked up and saw the little quadcopter hovering just above the crate, camera blinking. I waved. It zipped away fast, too fast for a kid's toy. Only one person in our neighborhood had bought a drone last Christmas. Nancy's husband, Carl. I didn't report it. I didn't even mention it. I just waited. Later that night, I opened my laptop and pulled up my security camera footage, the real ones. There she was, Nancy herself, sneaking around the corner of my backyard in all black, holding a remote control. She looked over her shoulder, launched the drone, and tried to guide it low under the tarp flap. The drone dipped down, and that's when the real fun started. I had already rigged the crate with a cheap RC interference signal booster. Nothing dangerous, just annoying. Enough to mess with any unlicensed controller. The drone twitched midair, then veered hard to the left straight into my birdbath. The sound was spectacular. Plastic crunching, water exploding, the rotor motor shorting out with a weak electrical sizzle. Nancy panicked. She tried to scoop up the pieces, but tripped and fell right into my flower bed. And my camera got it all. The trespassing, the unauthorized surveillance, the destruction of property. It was the golden moment I'd been waiting for. The next day, I didn't go to the HOA vote. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I just emailed every board member the footage. No commentary. No threats. Just a subject line. Interesting behavior from our HOA president. Is this acceptable? The fallout was immediate. Within the hour, Maggie texted me. Half the board is furious. They didn't know she did this. 2 hours later, Gary just pulled his vote to remove you. By sunset, Nancy's called an emergency meeting for herself. The next morning, Nancy came knocking. But this time, she didn't storm the porch. She stood on the grass, hands folded like a kid caught stealing. I may have made some poor decisions, she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard. I let this get personal. I shouldn't have gone behind your back. I leaned on the doorframe. Silent. She shifted uncomfortably. I like to propose a resolution. We can move past this. Quietly. That's when I knew I had her. She wasn't threatening me anymore. She was begging. But I wasn't ready to end things. Not yet. Because she still hadn't learned the most important lesson. Some things don't get buried. They linger, like a smell, or a secret, or a crate that nobody wants opened. And in the next HOA meeting, I was going to use that crate one last time to blow the whole system apart. The HOA held its monthly meeting at the community clubhouse. But this time, the seats were full. Word had spread like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know what would happen. Next up, Nancy sat at the front table like she always did. Posture perfect, smile frozen tight. But her eyes darted. Her fingers tapped the pen on her clipboard a little too fast. She was hanging by a thread. I didn't sit with the crowd. I stood in the back, arms folded, silent, watching. The moment the meeting started, Nancy cleared her throat and launched into a painfully rehearsed speech. There have been misunderstandings, she said, carefully avoiding words like drone or trespassing. I acknowledge that lines may have been crossed, but we must remember this community thrives on structure, order, and trust. A few people nodded politely, others looked away. Then she did it. She tried to flip the script. In light of recent distractions, I propose a motion to limit large, disruptive objects like suspicious crates from being left on lawns for extended periods. For the safety and peace of our neighborhood. There it was. The crate rule. The final swipe at me, wrapped in legalese. I stepped forward. No need, I said, loud enough to cut the room. Every head turned. I was going to remove the crate today anyway. Nancy straightened, hopeful. Oh, I smiled. But I thought I'd do it here, right now. On camera. Double quotes gasps. Phones came out. People hit record. I held up a small remote with a red button. The crate is on a spring latch. When I press this, the tarp comes off. You'll finally get to see what's inside. Nancy shot up. Wait, what is it? If it's something illegal, it's not illegal. I cut in. It's a symbol, and symbols don't break laws. I pressed the button. Back at my house, across the street, the tarp snapped off with a sharp hiss. The live feed from a hidden camera in my window streamed to my tablet, which I now turned to face the room. There, on screen, stood the crate open, and inside was a toilet. A cracked, ugly, used porcelain toilet filled with fake HOA citation, slips, stained papers, soggy envelopes, even a plastic gavel. All of it crumpled and jammed inside. The crowd fell silent. I stepped forward again, slowly. That crate, I said, wasn't a threat. It was a monument to every ridiculous warning letter, every color-coded demand, every fine over a flower pot, every fake smile that turned into a report. A few people started to snicker. I didn't want to scare anyone. I wanted to show you what your HOA leadership has been dumping on people like me for years. The snickers turned to laughter. Nancy's face drained of color. I buried it in symbolism, I said, just like they tried to bury my rights, my tools, my patience. The room erupted. Someone yelled, "That's genius." Another voice. Finally, someone said it. Phones caught Nancy's stunned silence. Her fellow board members leaned away from her like she was contagious. And then Maggie stood up and faced the crowd. I propose a vote, she said. Effective immediately, we dissolve the current board. Nancy shot to her feet. This is out of order. Maggie didn't flinch. Isn't everything, Nancy? Hands raised. Almost every single one. I didn't vote. I didn't have to. Nancy just stared at me. Eyes wide. It was over. But I wasn't finished because the final surprise wasn't in a crate. It was in the footage I hadn't shown yet. The meeting was over. Or at least, it should have been. Nancy had been voted out. Maggie was now the interim president. Half the audience was still buzzing over the toilet in the crate stunt. Some were even taking selfies with it from the sidewalk. But I wasn't ready to walk away just yet, because I had one more card to play. I stood quietly at the front as everyone packed up their papers and purses. Then, just loud enough for the room to hear, I said, "I'm sure we all want to move on, but there's something I think you should see first." Maggie gave me a puzzled look. Nancy froze mid-step, still gripping her clipboard even though she had no authority left to use it. I tapped my tablet and played a video clip. It was muted at first, grainy night vision footage from my backyard security cam. But then the audio kicked in, and everyone heard Nancy's voice, clear as day. "We'll bury every one of his tools. He'll think his shed got robbed. Just make sure you don't leave footprints. And if anyone asks, we'll say it was raccoons." A collective gasp rippled through the room. I fast-forwarded to another clip. "If the drone gets too close, I'll say it was Carl. I'll blame him. He's too dumb to fight back anyway." More whispers. A few shocked laughs. Someone muttered, "That's cold." I didn't need to narrate. The footage spoke for itself. She wasn't just a control freak, she was a manipulative bully willing to throw anyone under the bus to get her way. But then came the last clip. This one hit differently. Nancy, standing in her driveway late one night, talking on the phone. She didn't know I had a motion cam that picked up audio. "I don't care what the documents say. That lot isn't his. We'll just move the marker next month. By the time he notices, we'll already have claimed it. The HOA will back me. They always do." The room fell deadly silent. Because that wasn't just petty. That was illegal. Nancy wasn't just messing with me anymore, she was caught conspiring to falsify property boundaries. Suddenly, Carl stood up in the corner. He looked pale, his lips parted like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. You said that was just HOA gossip," he whispered to her. Nancy's head whipped around. "Carl, I didn't mean." He held up his hand. "You lied to me. Again." And with that, he walked out. No one stopped him. For a moment, Nancy just stood there, frozen, her entire kingdom collapsing in slow motion. The clipboard she clutched like a badge of honor slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a flat clap. Maggie finally spoke. Her voice was soft but razor sharp. "Nancy, I'll be forwarding these recordings to legal. You should consider hiring an attorney." Nancy turned to me. No more fake smiles. No rage. Just defeat. "You think you won," she said quietly. "But people like you lone wolves, you always end up alone." I stepped closer. "People like me don't need a pack to survive," I replied. "We just need to be left alone." And finally, she walked out. No applause. No cameras. Just silence. But I wasn't smiling yet. Because just when I thought it was over, I got a letter in the mail. Not from the HOA. From the county zoning office. And what it said made my blood run cold. The letter sat heavy in my hands. Stamped. With the county seal. Certified. And official looking enough to make my heart skip. I opened it on the porch with shaking fingers. Notice a zoning dispute. County records show an active request to revise the boundary lines between Parcel 17B and Parcel 17C. Public hearing to be held in 2 weeks. Parcel 17C was my land. Parcel 17B, Nancy's. Even after getting booted from the HOA and exposed in front of the neighborhood, she'd filed a zoning request trying to legally claim a chunk of my back. Yard. The same backyard her precious HOA had trashed with their campout. The same backyard where I'd buried her reputation with a toilet in a crate. She wasn't done. She was trying to win in secret through the county, the paperwork, the backdoor channels she thought no one would notice. That's when I realized I hadn't just beaten Nancy socially. I had cornered her. And now she was playing dirty. So I made one final call, not to a lawyer, not to the press. To Donnie. Again. 2 days later. Donnie backed his truck into my yard, same old trailer, same battered crate. But this time, the crate wasn't empty. It had proof. Because while Nancy thought she could rewrite property lines with a pen, I had spent the last few days digging up every camera angle, timestamp, and GPS-tagged file that showed her HOA trespassing, her drone, flying into my airspace, her members digging up my tools. And the clincher, I found the original survey stakes that Nancy thought she cleverly moved one night. With Carl's help, my property line was clearly marked, and I had video of Nancy shifting them 6 feet to the left. Evidence. Concrete. Undeniable. So when I walked into the county zoning office 2 weeks later, I didn't just bring a folder of documents. I brought a crowd, neighbors, witnesses, even Maggie. They packed into the hearing like it was a local courtroom drama. Half of them had popcorn. Nancy showed up late, dressed in gray, hair flat, energy drained. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She smiled at the officials. It didn't land. She opened with the usual fake sweetness. There's been a long-standing misunderstanding about the property line. I simply want what's been maintained as common space. That's when I stood up. I object. And I have footage proving that not only is this land mine, but that the previous HOA president committed property tampering, trespassing, and harassment. The officials raised eyebrows. Nancy's smile cracked. And then I rolled the footage every damning second of it. By the end of the hearing, the room was dead silent. The board ruled instantly. Property line stands. Zoning request denied. Ms. Elridge, you may be contacted for further investigation into this matter. Nancy didn't even argue. She just sat down. Crushed. Quiet. For once, she was completely invisible. After the hearing, Maggie walked up to me and grinned. You know, she said, you've got the neighborhood talking. People say you should run for HOA president. I laughed, only if I can use the crate as my podium. She laughed too. Deal. I walked home that evening, passing the exact trees Nancy once camped under like a queen. I stopped at the old stump where her banner once hung, took a breath of clean air, and smiled. Peace had returned. But the crate, I left it out front. As a reminder. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't fire or fury. It's the smell of fear that never quite leaves the people who tried to take what was yours. The end.